Arizona Congressman Ruben Gallego details the history behind his time in Iraq and the unit he served with in his new book. They Called Us Lucky, the life and afterlife of the Iraq War's hardest hit unit. So at first, Gallego's unit, known as the Lucky Lima, were stationed in the most dangerous territory in the war, the Al-Anbar region of Iraq, looking for weapons caches and insurgents trying to destabilize the developing Iraqi government. After 2 months in Iraq, Lima didn't have a single casualty.
But in May 2005, Lima's lucky streak came to an unfortunate end. 46 Marines and 2 members of the Navy serving with the battalion in Iraq were killed in action, making Lima Company the unit with the most men lost, more than any other American unit in the war. Joining us now to discuss his journey further is Arizona Congressman and member of the House Armed Services Committee, Ruben Gallego. Congressman, thank you for joining us, and thank you, of course, for your service. In another interview, you noted that although initially you didn't want to write the book, you felt called to share the story of your unit. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
I didn't want to write the book, and it's just because it's very painful. You know, I still deal with everything that I brought back from the war, the PTSD, the guilt, and I knew that it would be a painful process, and even doing interviews since I released the book has been very painful. But you know, we needed to tell the story. You know, the Marines I served with wanted this story out. It is an amazing story about amazing men that came together under some really hard conditions, and even after the war still stuck it together and have really been able to survive. But it's also an unvarnished view of a war. It's not a glorification war. I'm not a general. I'm not an officer. I'm not a Navy SEAL. I'm just your everyday infantry grunt, and I really show you what we end up doing and what we have to do in war zone, especially in bullshit wars like the Iraq War.
Well, what was your process for writing this book? Did you rely on mostly on your memory of events, or has your memory been clouded by the time and by the trauma? Did you go back and talk to comrades about the time to try to refresh and remind yourself of what had gone on? Did you leave stories out at the request of friends? I'm just curious what it was like to kind of putting these memories together into a book.
Well, all of the above. I have written this book in my brain for many years, and I had a lot of old mementos, pictures, a cruise book, and then I also had friends that I served with, like Andy Taylor, who took meticulous notes that he was very generous with. And then we also interviewed people that I served with to see their memories. And a lot of times we all agreed on the memories, and sometimes there was a little variance, and we talked about and tried to get as close to it as possible. But even in the process of this book, I actually unraveled or brought things back that I had buried very deeply. A portion of the book, I talk about my friend Xavi, who got killed by an IED blast, and that night I had to stay awake and watch over the remnants of his body and his vehicles, and there was wild dogs that were coming and tried to eat the body parts, and I had to shoot at those dogs. I totally had blocked that out of my mind for years because it was a traumatic event, not just the fact that Xavi was dead, but also the fact that I was, shooting dogs. And the process was very painful. Did we leave out stuff? Mostly we left out stuff because there's just so many stories, and you can't keep writing this book. But there are so many individual stories, fun times, bad times, heroic events, and you just have to figure out a way how to break this down. And the way I did it, and the way I imagined this story was based on a real fact, that a real occurrence where I was trying to talk one of my friends off the ledge, who was told he had never been in combat by the VA, and I had to drive to Albuquerque, New Mexico from Phoenix and make sure that he didn't do himself harm.
So your book is arriving at a time when the U.S. is winding down its presence in Afghanistan, when I think many people now view the Iraq War as a mistake and as a failure. Certainly, what's happened in Afghanistan as a failure. What is Is there a broader message that the American people need to take away from someone who was actually there, who saw what went on at a time when we're reconsidering some of our what we have done in that part of the world?
Well, the book doesn't really give a broader message. It does give my perspective, and throughout the whole book, I talk about how bullshit the war is. And what it does, and I hope it does, it makes people understand what war really is like. What you see on TV, these generals with all their ribbons and all their stars on the lapels, is not war. That's theatrics. The real war is an 18, 19-year-old scared man and women having to do something really awful, or having to do something extremely dangerous for some ambiguous reason. And I hope people will understand that and read my book, and it will actually, in the future, try to avoid all these useless wars, or at least wars that are, overextended to the point where they're beyond, beyond any objective, except for, no general politician wants to be known as the last one to abandon the war. So that's the point of view from that comes from this book, and I hope that's the message that people understand. I mean, I always say, young men die for old men pride, and that's what happens in war.
And Congressman, turning to electoral politics real quickly, I wanted to share with you some breaking news you may not have even heard yet. So Chris Sununu, very popular Republican governor of New Hampshire, just announced moments ago that he's going to run for re-election as governor in New Hampshire. Democrats had been panicked at the possibility that he was going to run against Maggie Hassan for Senate, which he was already polling 5-6 points ahead of her, would have been the favorite in that race. That allows Democrats a decent, a fighting chance at holding the Senate in 2022. You had yourself, considered running in 2020. Are you open to exploring a run for 2022 in Arizona?
A run for Senate in 2022?
Yeah.
No. I'm making sure that I'm, running for re-election. We have redistricting. There's no way Mark Kelly doesn't win. There's no way Mark Kelly wins if I don't turn out my district.
Oh, did I say 2022? I didn't mean to say 2022. I meant to. Yes, I meant to say 2024. 2024 is when there's going to be an interesting race in Arizona.
Yeah. Well, look, 2024 is a long time away, as you can tell from my previous answer. I'm focusing on 2022. I never say no to the future, and the most important thing I always care about is making sure that we have the majorities we need, the working majorities we need to accomplish, accomplish good programs to actually help Americans, get into middle class, prosper. So right now, I hope that's not the case. Right now, I want our senator to focus on passing the Build Back Better agenda, and I hope that we can all work together and get this done.
Are you optimistic? Because obviously, Democrats had a big setback last week in Virginia. Just floating the specter of Donald Trump is not enough to turn out voters. There's clearly a lot of frustration about policies, I think, associated with Democrats or Democratic allies, like the closures of schools and other things, and also just that the math is unfavorable. Obviously, we've talked about that a lot. What can the Democrats do to turn it around?
Well, we need to run on policy, and we need to actually run campaigns, and we need to get everybody out in our coalition. We don't win by just focusing on suburban voters. And it doesn't mean that they're not important, but we also do need to get out working class, Latinos, African Americans, young voters, and we avoid really, talking to them. And I think the way to talk to them is through policy, right? And the Build Back Better agenda is going to talk to that population. If you are a working mother, child care subsidy matters, and that's a big part of our coalition. If you're a Latino family, the child care tax credit is going to help, raise more than 50 to 60% of Latino families out of poverty. That's groundbreaking. If you're a young person, the investments that we have on climate change policy is going to inspire you because you actually know that the country cares about your future, and on and on and on. That's how we run, and we talk to them and we turn out the vote. We need to look at 2022 the way that Harry Reid looked at 2010. when he saw, the gallows hanging in front of him, that he was going to lose in a wave year as the Senate Majority Leader in a swing state. And he ended up going and turning out the vote, so much so that more Latinos voted in his Senate race than they did in the 2008 presidential election, because that was the investment he needed to do.
So how is redistricting looking? And according Arizona's new congressional maps could leave hundreds of thousands of voters represented in Congress by a member of the other party, causing confusion for voters. According to reports by 12 News in Arizona, come November 2022, a Republican Peoria resident who regularly cast a ballot for Republican Congresswoman Lesko could find themselves having to choose between you and a new Republican candidate. And in Central Phoenix, some constituents wouldn't even see you on the November ballot at all. What's your sense of how your district is going to look and how Arizona is going to shake out?
Well, my district is going to be less Democratic at this point. I'm concerned about some of the communities of interest that I think want to stay together, particularly city of Phoenix and then some of the near suburbs. So come what may, though, I'm going to work hard no matter who is in my district. And, if I have to go talk to the Republican in Peoria, I'll do that. And I certainly want to make sure that, I don't get all the Democrats packed into my district, because we need to have a competitive districts. Arizona is a 50-50 state, and we should make sure that, that we have districts where that is reflective of it. And I think right now we're almost at that point where I think we're a good map. There's some areas that we need to work on. I think there's some Latino areas of mine that don't want to be in other districts, and I get that. We'll see that if they come back. I'm worried about the rural Arizona. They're creating a massive rural Republican stronghold that's going to drown out Native American voices, and I think that needs to get fixed. But at the end of the day, I think Arizona's going to have a competitive map. It's a competitive state, so we're never going to have 6 Democratic seats. But because we know how to run campaigns in Arizona, because we're good on the issues, we can win a lot of these competitive seats.
The book is called They Called Us Lucky, The Life and Afterlife of the Iraq War's Hardest Hit Unit. Congressman Gallego, thank you so much for writing it and for sharing your perspective with us. And of course, thank you for your service. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good one.
You too. We'll be back with more Rising right after this. Don't go anywhere.